So back onto Amazon. Before we started this podcast, you were talking about lifetime value, and like lifetime value being a new metric that most brands don't track. So yeah, how are you looking at lifetime value on Amazon?
Yeah, so my back pre-Amazon, I was in various sort of e-commerce website marketing roles, and obviously like customer retention and lifetime value, fairly well understood sort of principles, and lots of kind of tools to be able to increase the recurring revenue of customers. When I moved into the Amazon space, obviously none of that was part of the mix really. It was just sort of new customer acquisition, sell the product, and just continue to plow through that essentially because there's a flood of people coming on to buy on Amazon, and you're just fighting for market share essentially with all of these new customers that are constantly coming in. Yes, some of those would have come back and bought the product again, but that wasn't a kind of focus. It was just a nice thing that happened as a result of the nature of the product. Obviously, as things become more complicated and there's more competition, and actually the number of new people on Amazon is not necessarily decreasing, it's slowing over time, inevitably, as it's obviously such a mature market, then we've got to think about other ways of generating revenue. And I know specifically think about generating revenue rather than generating customers. So that's where sort of, obviously, this only applies for businesses where there is a natural sort of replenishment of a given product. We're not talking about necessarily about recurring revenue across different products within a range, although obviously that can happen, but it's really about how do we build up recurring revenue based on people coming back to buy the same product again and again. Now, obviously that depends on what type of product it is, but there's obviously huge amounts of different types of products out there that kind of fit into that category. Again, this was for 2 years ago, really just starting to develop those ideas with some of our beauty clients. Often it's in the beauty space where kind of things move forward faster, earlier than other categories. So they're obviously more open to that, and there's more of a kind of marketing understanding within those types of businesses than, let's say, some kind of office supplies or something like that, where it's not, there's more kind of traditional type categories. So obviously a bit more open-minded to sort of different ideas. So what we're really kind of seeing is, and partly because Amazon was then suddenly starting to release some data which gave us some insight into what was actually happening in terms of new customer versus recurring customer. That, ultimately, without that sort of opening up of the data set, we couldn't even have those kind of conversations because everyone was just flying blind. It's still not perfect by any stretch. There's still things that we'd like there to be in this kind of area, but that's not there. But there's enough to make some really informed decisions, smart decisions, and we can see the results of those things. So really what we look at is, obviously, firstly, product that fits the criteria is replenishable. And then, often with our clients, they've been trading on Amazon for a number of years. So we can see back, over 2 years of lifetime value, and we can look at that by product, and we can look at the frequency of purchasing, like, how many days, weeks, whatever, between purchases of that particular ASIN. And then therefore we can see like a 12-month lifetime value on a particular product. Now, the critical thing for every business, if they kind of fit within that criteria, is to look at their ROAS target or their ACOS target, whichever one they're working to, based on their 12-month revenue on the product, not on the first purchase. And when you start to do that, you'll unlock growth, because you can then allow for a lower ROAS, knowing that the revenue and the profit is generated over time. So as long as you can take that sort of, it's not a leap of faith, but there isn't like a perfect sort of mathematical model where you can just plug in the numbers and it will tell you exactly what's going to happen. But as long as you can kind of piece those things together, it's more than anecdotal. It's clear that those things will happen. It's just not perfectly attributed. As long as you can have that confidence, then businesses in that space should be looking essentially at lowering their ROAS to target new to brand customers, knowing that X percent of those will become returning customers, and that your returning customers give you 20, 30, 40% more revenue. So it's not necessarily about communication or marketing strategy that is trying to engage with returning customers. It's about unlocking the growth of new customers, knowing that a percentage of them become returning customers. So it's just a volume game, really. You know what the percentages don't necessarily change, but the volume of people going through that funnel changes. That's the important bit, and that's where the growth of recurring revenue comes, and recurring revenue is by far the most profitable channel.
Yeah, as long as the cash flow cycle is taken into account, I assume. Otherwise, they'll be like, you'll be telling the customer they're getting more profitable, and they're telling you they've got less and less money, I assume.
There is a sort of there is definitely that effect within the data. You can see it. So what we tend to see is, take an example like one of our beauty clients that does shampoos and conditioners is like their main products. We had this conversation with them and said, like if we were going to really accelerate growth, and that was their objective. It wasn't to sort of have 5% month-to-month growth. It was a much greater, month-to-month change. This is the best way to do it. Okay, we were able to sort of model that out to some degree, but as I say, it was not perfect, and it did take some confidence from the brand to sort of agree to that, because we could not say perfectly or with any guarantee this is exactly what's going to happen. But there's enough logic there to say like this is a smart thing to do if we want to accelerate growth. So yes, within the first 2 to 3 months, we see a spike of new customers. The revenue increases. But the advertising cost obviously goes up at the same time. So the margin will decrease through those few months, but then sort of obviously depending on kind of what the life cycle of that product is it 30 days, 60 days, 90 days, whatever, then you start to see that returning customer come through. You've lifted up your revenue, but your obviously your margin came down a little bit. Obviously your revenue continues to increase because you're continually pumping that up, but then as customers come back, they buy again from you, and your profit margin comes back to where it was, and your absolute profit then increases as a result of that because you've got more revenue coming in as well.
Makes sense. And is this how you respond and counteract whether increasing CPCs, or is this something else? Okay.
Well, yeah. So the two things that we've talked about are largely, I wouldn't say a response to increasing CPCs, but they are the best solution to increasing CPCs. So look at things on a recurring revenue basis is one, if that applies to your products. If that doesn't apply, or if it does apply, then obviously looking at product discovery outside of the platform. So obviously TikTok being like one of the best ways to generate that product discovery. People will buy the product on TikTok Shop, but a lot of those people will also go either to your website or they'll go to Amazon as well. So you have that halo effect from that product discovery on TikTok. So yeah, you're not fighting for top of search space for like your most competitive keywords where the CPC's gone through the roof. People are coming onto the platform to buy the product because they've been qualified by something you've done outside of the platform.
And I guess after the one final question was about launching, something we were talking about before, which is like when launching, when should you be targeting profitability or expecting to make a profit?
Yeah,
it's a good question. I haven't launched a product in a little while, so what's the latest deep data that you're telling clients?
So I mean, if we're looking at that kind of recurring revenue model, what we're saying is that that's not necessarily for businesses that have just launched onto Amazon. We've got to have some data to indicate that actually people are coming back to buy the product before we've got the confidence to say this is a model that we should then pursue. Now, they might have some data obviously from their website or elsewhere, which says, that is definitely going to be the case. And then obviously that gives us a kind of confidence to kind of develop that type of strategy. But obviously we have to be cautious because the data is imperfect, and it's time really that allows us to increase the confidence in that type of strategy. So when we're launching businesses onto Amazon, and let's say they do have a replenishable products, we still go with that same kind of standard, in inverted commas, strategy of obviously the right keywords and targeting Amazon advertising essentially to drive the growth. What we're saying to those businesses, they've got to focus on the number of units sold per day, per week, so sales velocity essentially, rather than their revenue and profit. So I'm not saying anything there that should be new to businesses. It's focused on the sales velocity to begin with. That is always the case. I think that will always be the case when businesses launch onto Amazon. yes, obviously that does have implications on profitability in those first few months, but ultimately it's a case of this is the game you're playing. These are the rules that we're playing by. If you don't do it, then if we just look at Amazon in isolation, you're going to get some growth, but obviously not as fast growth as you might want. Now, obviously, there's exceptions to that because they might have loads of brand awareness or whatever it might. You might be spending millions of dollars on Meta or something, but ultimately, if they're not, if it's an Amazon only business, then they're just going to kind of trickle along. So we're very much still with that sort of classic philosophy to it to begin with, but what we want to develop is maturity and sophistication in the strategy over time, because the data's there to tell us that actually there are better ways to do things by looking at recurring revenue, but only once that data's there to give us the confidence to go down that route.
Data led. And as always, depends. It depends.
Yeah.
The answer is it depends.
Yeah.
Love it. Okay, cool. Thank you. So we're going to move on to the next part of our episode, which is our controversial take. As controversial as you want. We can always edit it out. What's your most debatable or controversial opinion about related to either Amazon or the e-commerce industry?
Yeah, so I'm going to go like head on for AI with a large degree of sort of ego involved in that. But I think it's specifically really, I'm talking about Amazon. So we're talking about Rufus and how Rufus may or may not be influencing how shoppers are discovering product, but obviously what we're really talking about is how brands and sellers should or should not be reacting to these potential changes to the way people get to their product pages, essentially. I see a lot of things on LinkedIn about, very detailed breakdowns of what Rufus is and how to apply it into product, particularly into product pages. But then I look at what those sort of recommendations are, and I think there's just best practice, like complete all of the metadata in the back end. Use descriptions on your images. Well, you absolutely should be using description on your images. That's not got anything to do with Rufus. It's about communicating to the customer and explaining to them why they should buy that product and why it's better than other products that are out there. That has always been the case pre-AI. So I often find that, there's a lot of hyperbole around it. At the moment, I would say there's nothing that tells me that those best practices are wrong or should be changed in any way, shape or form. I think as long as people are following best practices, they understand what those best practices are, they're going to be fine, like totally fine. It's the same thing I see within you see all of the time within, let's say, Google SEO, with people trying to second guess what the Google algorithm is, how it's changed, so on and so forth. And they're chasing algorithmic changes rather than just focusing on the fundamentals, getting those right, being consistent with those things, applying them properly, and just doing that over and over again, rather than just chasing the latest sort of trend or hack or whatever. I think there's no one's smart enough to outsmart an algorithm. Let's just focus on the best practices and you'll be fine. I think that's ultimately my take on it all. And I think anything that is suggesting that people need to do anything massively different to what those best practices are, particularly on Amazon, then I think it's misguided and it's a lot of time wasting, essentially.
Yeah, makes sense. I mean, I was at a SEO conference. The conference had an SEO talk a few months ago, and they had, of course, a talk on how to appear in all of the tools, ChatGPT, Gemini, everything. And yeah, I thought the same thing when I watched that talk. They were like, you need to use proper tagging, and top 10 lists work really well. I'm pretty sure that's what they've been recommending for SEO for the last decade.
Yeah, that sounds like the BuzzFeed SEO strategy from 2015 or something.
Before they went just like tear everybody down was their strategy as well, wasn't it? Just shit on everyone. Yeah.
It's hard to find something truly novel. So, I'm very aware of that, but I do think there's just people trying to either overcomplicate things or reframe things or reword things that have always been true, giving it a new name because of AI. And I think, no, it's just this thing that's always been true.
And all the loophole stuff gets closed relatively quickly because,
Yeah.
the age-old maxim is that marketers ruin everything eventually.
Yeah.
Whatever was good is destroyed by marketers eventually, whether it's Facebook, ads, everything, because everyone just optimizes out of it forever.
Yeah. That is definitely the case. Yeah.
Love it. Cool. So if anyone's interested in learning more about you, Tom, and Ford Baker, what should they do?
Yeah, I mean, they should definitely learn more about Ford Baker. I'm far less interesting and useful, valuable to them as a person. But yeah, they can go to our website, fordbaker.com, take a look, obviously, at what we do, what our offering is. Anybody can book a free consultation through the website. That'll be with me to talk about anything to do with Amazon, TikTok Shop, Walmart, all three of them if they want to. And, particularly with a kind of global viewpoint as well.
Awesome. Thank you. Well, Tom, thanks so much for taking the time. I know it's freezing cold in England.
It is.
Thanks for making it, and thanks to everyone listening and watching. As always, please like and rate the show. It really helps us get more reach. And come back again next week for another amazing guest. Thank you.